I believe next up we have Nancy Barth. Uh, Nancy is a USGS research hydrologist with the Montana Wyoming Water Science Center. And she's going to be providing us with a kind of tale of how the CESU has been leveraged for student career development. And so take it away, Nancy. Thank you so much for being here. We look forward to it.
Excellent. Thank you, Brandon. So I'm going to, hopefully you guys can hear me. Yep, I'm getting a nod. This is good. And then I'm going to go into presentation mode. Can you see my presentation screen as I move you to a different place? I got a thumbs up. Okay, excellent. Thank
good.
you. Oh, perfect. Okay, so I'm just gonna, for bandwidth, I'm gonna turn off my camera and then I'll turn it on at the end. Sounds good. Okay, perfect. Okay, well, okay, first of all, thank you guys for letting me, on behalf of the USGS and on behalf of all the water science centers, you know, and especially our region, have the opportunity to talk about the training of the next generation of hydrologists through the CESU program network. I'm giving this presentation on behalf of also who we're going to talk a lot about, which is Mark Cedarface. And I've rehearsed this presentation, and I you know, I'm hoping I don't cry because it's such a great story. And I'm super proud to share, you know, what we've done. So with that, I do have to kind of do a quick, you know, bookkeeping. I was formerly with the Dakota Water Science Center after finishing my PhD at the University of Iowa in 2018. And I had formerly worked with the USGS back in the California Water Science Center as a master's student before I did my PhD. So for me to put Wyoming, Montana, this is new. I was transferred about a year ago, so you're going to see a lot of bias here to a description of an ongoing experience through the Dakota Water Science Center. So where our collaborative story begins, and that is training the next generation of hydrologists in flood frequency. I'm passionate about this. I love teaching and training as well. But to kind of give you a primer, we're going to focus this talk mostly on flood frequency analysis. And in 1982, there was a federal guidelines that came through to kind of even the playing field of performing flood frequency estimates. And that was in 1982. And I can tell you, they did not expect 35 years later it would take to come up with an updated flood frequency methods that was published in 1992 or in 2019. I was part of the HFOG committee that was designated to go over and test the methods for the updates in Bulletin 17C. And so I'm excited to, you know, show you some updates that we've done in the purview and how it relates to the CESU experience. So to give a primer for those of you who have not seen flood frequency before, what we do is we fit a probability distribution to the sample or recorded data. So in this example, I have a long-term gauge here in New Mexico. Each one of the blue dots over time represents the annual maximum peak discharge per year. And then as analysts, we put it in fancy paper, but we fit a distribution in the United States, which is the log Pearson type 3 distribution that was both described in Bulletin 17B and C. The black dots represent those blue dots that were gauged, and the red fitted line is the overall distribution that engineers, let's say, will use for infrastructure design and risk assessment. And so commonly we talk about the 1% annual exceedance probability or the 100-year flood event. So in your mind, keep this picture, if you will, this frequency analysis in the back of your head, because you will never see anything this beautiful. It doesn't happen. It doesn't work like this in the real world. So currently in the Dakota Water Science Center, we're wrapping up the updating of flood frequency estimates in South Dakota. It's amazing that the at-site flood frequency was last updated through water year 2001, which means that we have an additional 20 years of annual peak stream flow data that are available in this updated analysis. We now have the updated federal guidelines in Bulletin 17C, and we also have a new statistical approaches that we can use to leverage to address the very complex hydrology in some cases that are unique to South Dakota. But we can also leverage the diverse background of current and retired hydrologists in the Dakota Water Science Center. And we can leverage the CESU program to train the next generation of hydrologists. And I'm going to take that in parentheses and put it down to one. And I'm going to introduce you to Mark Cedarface on this multi-year project. So training the next generation of hydrologists really, and I had to think about this, what this actually means to me. And it really came down to science and building relationships as project manager and mentor in this situation. I'm excited to share this with you. And it's, again, a collaboration between USGS, CESU, and the South Dakota School of Mines, specifically the Civil Engineering Department. But new to the Dakotas, I had to write a proposal for the statewide updates. I got that, got the funding. I built the USGS team, and we wanted to bring in students in the CESU program. And so I needed to write the purpose of this collaboration and the project objectives, not only for our study, but for the CSU agreement. And that was specifically to do the updates in South Dakota on flood frequency estimates, and then advance the state of science, which is challenging in and of itself. But I put these, I highlight in conjunction the colors here. Building relationships as part of this agreement was, I knew this would be for mentoring, but honestly, it ends up being a bigger collective of fostering collaboration. So from the science side, there's some very complex hydrology considerations in the Black Hills, specifically leveraging historic, and now because we have Bulletin 17C, paleo flood information, right? So in the previous Sando report that was done through water year 2001, there's that iconic picture in the bottom left-hand side, the cars stacked on one another, right? After the historic rains and devastating rains subsided and went away. And so this was left over from we just celebrated last year, the June 9th, 1972 heavy thunderstorm that occurred in Rapid City, South Dakota. And so with Bulletin 17C, we have a lot more techniques as analysts to couch how big this 1972 peak was in the historical context. So since the Sando 2008 report, we had at least 2 additional USGS reports on collecting paleo flood information based on slack water deposits, fossils, and radiocarbon dating. And so what we see is, and this teeny, to all the way to the right, these teeny tiny little black dots are actually USGS annual peak flow data that is recorded. The one that I've highlighted and circled is the 1972 flood event, markedly bigger than anything else that we had gauged. This triangle is one that is a historic peak that was captured, but was not captured when a USGS stream gauge was actually enacted. And what these previous bars represent are flow intervals of paleo flood data, bringing us back to much bigger flow magnitude events back to 1,000 years ago. So now we have the statistical way of incorporating flood information of non-exceedances and flood intervals from paleo flood data in the Black Hills all the way back to 1,000 years ago. So this is where the science and building relationship occurs. Mark did a great job as an undergraduate student learning about flood frequency 101. He was engaged and excited, but he had an aptitude and passion about hydrogeology, flood frequency, and historical information. So he asked if he could take the initiative to really get into what is paleo flood data, how do I use it in a flood frequency analysis, and I said absolutely. I wanted to encourage anything that he wanted to do, and he did it. So he came up, this is preliminary of course, he came up with a flood frequency fit for Box Elder Creek at Nemo that shows all the gauge data here in the middle part of the blue dots. dots of the annual peak flows, but then you see these two high outliers in the triangle and dots. Those are the 72 and historic peaks that we know about. And these two bigger interval bars are the paleo flood data. So incorporating all of that, we have much better information to inform infrastructure to mitigate against the 1972 flood event. So this is a win. This was something I encouraged, and I was really excited. About the same time, Mark was deciding, should I go on for an advanced master's degree, or should I just be done, and maybe get a PE? And I encouraged him, please continue on with your master's. And thankfully he did. So that got us to the next complexity in the Black Hills. This one is near and dear to my heart because this is what I did my PhD dissertation on, was these mixed populations. I did mine in the Western United States, but Sando and others worked with USGS headquarters and did a new methodology that had never been done on mixed population analysis back in their previous report. And what mixed populations are not only these big whoppers that are so different, than the rest of the annual peak stream flows that you would see, but they also, in cases, are a violation of some of the assumptions that we make. They are not necessarily generated from the same type of flood generating mechanism. These might be under isolated convective thunderstorms versus more of a quiescent, smaller magnitude streamflow event, right? So these violations need to be addressed. And again, as Mark was starting his master's thesis, wanted to take mixed populations head on. I certainly encouraged him working with me on that topic because I'm very passionate about it. Building relationships. So we've got the science. Now we actually brought two retired co-authors emeritus from the previous USGS study, and they are providing their expertise on our proposed update techniques for their mixed population analysis with what Mark and I are coming up with. And we're developing hydrogeologic regions from the previous co-author, Dan Driscoll, as well as the applied statistical approaches from Steve Sando, working with Mark and I. And so this is such a collaboration. I'm very excited about this experience. But Mark wanted to take it one step further. He wanted to use some kind of information about, that has not been done on convective thunderstorms in the Black Hills. Came up with a topic similar to one I did in my PhD, and he took it and went further. So he actually he looked at convective thunderstorm contributions to these high outliers in the Black Hills. And in doing that, he used and leveraged the CESU program to help him on his master's thesis and defend it. We are currently using those results in our update for the flood frequency procedures for mixed populations. And being, an advisor as well, I had him pull back a little bit on what he put in his dissertation. And he, after his master's thesis was published at the school, then he did additional analyses, and it is in review, his first USGS scientific investigations report. See, try not to cry, but I'm very proud of him. He has his own report that he did based on his master's thesis. So once he wrapped that up, we're still going on with the complexities in South Dakota. He wanted to, consider possibly doing a PhD. And I said, oh gosh, please. I'm the nearest you'll know to somebody who recently completed it, in and out of the USGS. Please do. And to ruin the story, he did. He did choose that. But in doing that, I shared with others just what an amazing contribution he has been to our USGS team. And so we are now having him extend his efforts beyond the complexities in South Dakota, but now he is on a 4-year study that's wrapping up. It's a 9-state study region here on the right. You can see some states that overlap into the Great Plains CESU region, but he is now addressing non-stationarity. So in this work with the researchers, he's working with going further with his non-stationarity based on metrics that he was looking at in his master's thesis. So with 3 years, we went from an undergraduate student through his master's into his PhD, and he is officially converted into his contract position. So I'm running out of time here. I see. So I'm just excited to answer some questions of what did I learn. I learned a lot. It represented everything I went through with the USGS, and I'm excited on all the successes that Mark has had. And without the long-term agreements that have been going on with USGS, CESU, and South Dakota School of Mines, nothing could ever have been accomplished as what Mark's story has represented. And with that, I thank you.
Thank you so much, Nancy. Does anybody have questions for Nancy?
Yeah. Okay, well, with that, I think we're good. I'll stop sharing my screen again. Thank you. I only cried once, and I'm very proud of that. Thank you.
Thanks, Nancy, and thank you for sharing this story. It's a great one to hear, and great one for the group to hear as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
I get the crying though, that getting to the end point and getting the thing finally published is always a dramatic experience, as it were.